longtime viewers of this channel, if there are such people, hello, if you exist, may remember my goal of trying to read every book on the paperback bookcase that I have and review all those books on this channel. In fact, this channel was started just as a reason to do that. You know, I was like, how can I make myself read all the books on this bookcase? I was like, yeah, I'm always talking about doing something on YouTube. Because I do watch a lot of YouTube videos. And, you know, I've just been limited by not having any fancy technology or currently any like video editing skills. I don't know any of that stuff. I believe I could learn it. My friend Ty has taught himself and is really excellent at it now. He has a Coney Island YouTube channel I would recommend to anybody called Welcome to Dreamland. I really like his YouTube channel. He makes Coney Island like seem super important. I'm like, dang, this really is like this microcosm of everything and this lens into all these issues of all these different times. Way cool. And it's funny. Ty's hilarious. And anyway, so I'm still pursuing that goal. Here's another book that I'm reading. I just read. I finished it for the paperback bookcase. So here I'm now going to show on screen all the books I've read from the paperback bookcase already. Wow. Yeah, I just got started. So I thought I'd read a bunch of these little short ones. I figure if I read like 4 a month, you know, because most months have 4 weeks, then that'll keep me on a good track to finish this in like, 4 years or so. And that'll be a challenge because some of the books are bigger and it'll be more difficult. And this thing's going to take me like a decade. Whatever. I was going to live for the next decade anyway. Might as well do it while reading really good books and making my writing better by reading good books. And like, I love the idea of having read a whole bookcase. It's going to be so satisfying. And I'll have it documented on this crazy channel for myself. And I don't know. I'd watch a weird documentary about somebody just reading all the books on a paperback case. Maybe I'll edit like relevant stuff out to that and put that together. Send it around to weirdo film festivals. So, heck, you put a good score on something, anything can be awesome. One of my favorite movies is this documentary from 1982 called, I like it so much. It's called Antonio Gaudi, and it's about the Spanish architect, and it barely has any information about him. There's a brief little interview clip or two, maybe, and it's mostly just establishing shots, basically panning around his buildings to very interesting soundtracks, beautiful songs, sometimes ocean waves or animal sounds. It's wild. Anyway, I love that movie, and there's all kinds of movies, Dinner with Andre, that's a movie. Sleep from Andy Warhol, that's a movie. Empire State, also from Andy Warhol. Nothing happens in these movies. Anyway, there's the paperback case in question. Top shelf is all individual authors, one author per book. And the second shelf is authors with more than one title. The third is individual and authors with more than one title. And individual. Just worked out that way. And then, I mean, once you notice that something is kind of mostly a certain way, that's when you step in and finesse and be conscientious about it all. Art really is a collaboration between those different elements of yourself, like your unconscious and your conscious, noticing, well, I mean, that's not what this is here. This is a bookcase. But yeah. But with any idea, it's about noticing patterns that are probably occurring naturally or just things, anything you notice, and then just doing it more consciously. A guiding quote for me in creating really is Billy Wilder's, if you're going to be subtle, be obvious about it. If you're going to be subtle, at least be obvious about it. That's so good. Yeah, I say use bold strokes, create boldly. And, man, I hate when something's too subtle. It's just like, what? Where's the payoff? But I'm, like, for real excited to read this whole bookcase. I've read a lot of these books already, I mean, at different times, but I'm going to read them again. I'm reading everything. And I want it all fresh in the brain. I mean, come on, novels are the best. Who doesn't love novels? Novels and fiction. Story. Novel is a playground. A novel is such a wonderful expression of the mind. A lot of these are novels. I mean, you just have, it's a true auteur work, a novel. Usually an individual made that. You know, sometimes with a small group of editors. And yeah, I love paperbacks. I'm going to read up on paperbacks so I can share some facts and stuff. Paperbacks were invented in 1792. No, that's not right. All right. In general, I say don't put specific images on your book covers. I mean, I love this cover. This is an incredible cover. But like, I don't know, like a fixed human form, I think it's something to avoid on a cover. But this cover pulls it off. This is a play, The Effect of Gamma Rays on Man in the Moon Marigolds. And the title is really attention-grabbing. This is a Pulitzer Prize-winning play by Paul Zindel. I mean, that is a cover. That's a cover. It's so good. I can't believe I complained about anything. It's just a great cover. It's a kind of grim play. It's kind of about generations. It's mostly about this, like, just kind of horrifying mother figure, Beatrice, who seems to be closely based on Paul Zindel's mother, who he ended up being friends with in his later life, according to the introduction of this. But she's just awful in it. She kills the kid's rabbit with chloroform just because she's upset about something. She's like got bizarre paranoias about being ashamed by people in public. She's horrible to her kids and giving them awful neuroses. She is the gamma ray that is mutating the marigolds that are her daughters. And but there are literal marigolds in this as well. One of the daughters is really into science. It's kind of hilarious. The only like good adult character in this whole thing is a science teacher that you never meet, you just hear about. But Paul Zindel was a science teacher. That's so funny. I always think about Freud saying every dream is a fulfillment of a wish, because to me, works of art are dreams, you know, somebody dreamed those up. So it's like, it's always kind of funny if you think about a work of art as a wish fulfillment. That's why sometimes when you watch just like a really nasty horror film or something, it's like, who wanted this, man? You got issues, bro. But so there are two daughters. The other daughter is like kind of popular and fashionable, but she has seizures and night terrors and like a lot of health problems. And I don't know, it's interesting. The family is pretty wild. The mom's passing cigarettes to her daughters. They're all just puffing in the house. The mom just never stops complaining, and she's horrible. There was a movie version of this directed by Paul Newman, and I think it was in 1972. I was reading all about it today, and the movie poster had a great log line. It was something like, life has been a bitch to Beatrice, but, and vice versa. And that's pretty funny. Because she's just awful in it, you know, kind of amusing in her manic way, alternately sentimental about her dead dad, and just vicious to everybody about everything, easily flattered. You know what? Now that I find myself describing this figure, I think, hey, pretty vivid characters, Paul Zindel, you know? He wrote this when he was 25, the introduction said. I read that introduction like 3 times. I don't know why it just works out that way. Don't you ever like flip back, read the introduction again, just in an idle moment or something, wondering about this or that? It's short too. But Paul Zindel wrote this great young adult series. I didn't even know it was a series. I thought it was a duology. But The Pigman, the first book, The Pigman, is really interesting. It's this epistolary novel between 2 young people. It's like, it would be like PG-13, you know, and it was kind of groundbreaking. Some have called it the first YA novel, like the first true YA novel. It really kind of does something unique. And I loved it when I was a young reader. I was like, whoa, I don't have any other book like this. And it has a sequel that's kind of an interesting coda to it that goes to a wild place. And then apparently he wrote an autobiography called The Pigman and Me. The sequel's called The Pigman's Legacy. But then the third one is, The Pigman and Me. And it's more recent, but it's like an autobiography, and it's partly about writing those books. So, and he considers it a trilogy, which I think that's really interesting. I like hybrid stuff. That's cool. I don't consider my work hybrid. I consider it nonfiction. I really try to be scrupulous about the nonfiction thing. I mean, obviously, truth is subjective, but like, if I do tons of research, and I try to just have truthful intent. I let people that were there at times I write about read it and like make sure it tracks with everybody. So the mom also takes care of, what's the deal? Like old people that she kind of just parks them in there. There's an older lady nanny, and the mom talks to her like she's a little insane little baby or something, just yelling at her. But it does seem like nothing's getting through to this old lady. According to something I read on the internet, when the movie came out, the person that played that role, I think it was Cloris Leachman, she never speaks in the play at all, but she became like a talk show celebrity, like really doing the circuit from the movie, and was the delight of all America. It's a very 70s work. Just looking at this cover, I'm reminded of like my older sister's bedroom in the early 80s. I'm like, whoa, that's a vibe. That's a time. I once read this zine, and it was really interesting, and it was like everything I remember about the 70s. And it was just lists and lists of all these things, everything from peacock chairs to wood paneling to specific brands to pet rocks. And reading it, I was like, was I alive in the 70s? And I wasn't, except for very little, 1979, September 1979. But the 70s, a decade doesn't just go away. And I mean, what a cover. That's cool. It's like multimedia. It looks like flowers and a black and white photo and maybe some color photo stuff, huh? And a good font. Very San Francisco, 1960s, though this is 70s. Just the font, I'm thinking. Which was influenced by that turn of the century stuff, right? Yeah, it gets compared to Tennessee Williams. I have not read Tennessee Williams, though my second wife was in a band called the Glass Menageries. Yeah, there's a part in this. It's interesting to read a play. It goes pretty fast. And this is actually a really well-formatted book with illustrations, and it looks nice. It's flipping by too fast, yeah. There's a part in this book where you hear about what the effects are of plants being irradiated with gamma rays. And that's a real thing, this atomic gardening, they call it, where you irradiate plants. I read a lot online today. Anyway, there's this part where the effects are described, and it says something like, a lot will die off and just not show any signs of life. And it basically is describing their family metaphorically and what's going on. The mom is just warping these girls. Somehow the girls are thriving and growing in their ways. Like one of them wins a science fair prize. It's just brilliant about atomic stuff. Oh yeah, that's another thing. There's like this thread of science woven through it. It's almost like saying, if your life is tumultuous and crazy, like hold on to the real. Science is this real through line that's woven through it all. Like whatever the emotions, think of the real. One of those topics you can like meditate on and get something out of, I think. Yeah, it's kind of weird talking about this now. I'm like, this thing is actually like kind of quite provocative. I thought it was kind of simple when I read it, but like now I find myself having thoughts. There's this rabbit in it too. I think, the mom kills the rabbit with chloroform toward the very end. And spoiler alert, sorry. She's always threatening too. I think the rabbit symbolizes life in a way. Back then, there was this popular test called the rabbit test, where women could find out the sex of their babies by injecting their urine into rabbit. No, maybe it wasn't that. It was if they were pregnant or not. Yeah, my mom had a job at a lab doing this. I couldn't believe it when I found that out. I was like, "You did that?" She's like, "Well, I worked for the doctor that did it." I'm like, "Why couldn't people just wait and find out? Why do you have to kill rabbits?" And I hate that. But anyway, I think the rabbit in this might symbolize. Well, of course, rabbits symbolize fertility, but might also symbolize pregnancy and continuation of life. I mean, this lady's going to have toxic effects. In his introduction, Zindel said that he woke up one day, basically, and this script was sitting next to his typewriter, and he felt like he must have written it unconsciously in his sleep or in a fugue state or something. I'm like, that's awesome. But he said when he sees it performed, he's just crying all the time and laughing, and it just really affects him because I think Beatrice is really based on his mom. Yeah, so the mom kills the rabbit. Despite that, some of the marigolds in her house are going to still grow and be interesting. At least one of them. Wow. I don't know, it's kind of heavy. But I think it's supposed to be funny, and it probably is funny. Like if you see it performed, I bet all the gestures are exaggerated, and I bet the mom gets a lot of laughs. But she's like totally like, ugh. Living with someone unstable like that would be really horrible, and that would be really horrible. But I like this. I'm glad I read it. It's sit on my shelf forever. Paul Zindel, you're a cool, weird, interesting writer, man. One of those lost bards of the 70s. And maybe who's talking about this now? Probably somebody. It seems to live on as a play performed by high schools, and it is a play. But I mean, yeah, so it gets performed. There's many editions. There's some great posters for it and for the movie version. There's this, it's got to be a Polish one from when the movie came out, and it's incredible. I would love to own that. I'd love to own it. Maybe I'll get another one of these and frame it or something, because that's just a great cover. I like to have good book covers on my walls. Yeah, shame hangs in this house. This did not take me long to read. I bet I read this. I mean, I read it over a few days, but I bet this is like 2 hours of reading time or something. And now that's in my being, and I think, I've got like a really nuanced family scenario in myself that I didn't have, And I still think about The Secret Sharer sometimes. I'm like, that's such an interesting story. And Heart of Darkness was cool too. All right, anyway. Paperbacks. I'm going to read them all. 200 over 5 years. It'll probably be like 5 years. And then I'll say, yep, I read all these. Everyone will be like, yep, he read them. Okay, well, speaking of David Lynch, since he died recently, listen to this description. This sounds like exactly like something that happens in Twin Peaks: The Return. That must have been based on this scientific experiment that this seems to be kind of documenting. Today I saw it. Behind the glass, a white cloud began to form. He placed a small piece of metal in the center of the chamber, and we waited until I saw the first one. A trace of smoke that came from nowhere and then disappeared. Then another and another until I knew it was coming from the metal. They looked like water sprays from a park fountain, and they went on for as long as I watched. And he told me the fountain of smoke would come forth for a time, and if I had wanted to, I could have stayed there all my life, and it would never have ended. That fountain so close I could have touched it. In front of my eyes, one part of the world was becoming another. Atoms exploding, flinging off tiny bullets that caused the fountain, atom after atom, breaking down into something new. And no one could stop the fountain. It would go on for millions of years, on and on. This fountain from eternity. The Effect of Gamma Rays on Man on the Moon Marigolds by Paul Zindel. I recommend it. It won the Pulitzer. The movie was lauded. Roger Ebert gave it 3 out of 4 stars or something like that. Here's his other book I really loved of his growing up. It's such a cool book, man. I love The Pig Man. You know, I'm like so grateful for all my literary influences. You know, like I'm like I don't know. I have so many like moments of just like really discovering and getting excited about different kinds of writing. Like, because when you're really little, like you mostly like want like escapist stories, kind of. I don't know why. Just like really wild and magical. And when you start getting more into realism, like this is way realism. Or like I was thinking about a separate piece today, and its sequel, Peace Breaks Out, and how these were like the first books that I loved for their prose, not for what they were about at all. Like I didn't care so much what they were about, though I was engaged in the story. But it's like it's so cool when you have those moments of reading where you're like, oh, this is different, and I'm seeing it and enjoying it in a different way. Reading is so many different like acquired tastes. You really have to like become a reader, and not everyone can do it. You know, you can't go in with a super basic mindset, or I don't know. It's, I mean, I guess you can, but it'll go away. You know, yeah, reading is so cool. I love reading. Right now, I'm reading more and writing a little bit less than I've been lately. I'm like, that's interesting. Probably all right. Probably increase the quality of the writing I do. Yeah, great book. These kids meet an old guy by doing prank calls. They all become friends, and they kind of betray the guy by throwing a wild party at his house, and a lot of his stuff gets destroyed, and he dies. It's oh, wow. But they're writing their two halves, their versions of it back and forth to each other in letters, and so it's very interesting. Maybe not letters, but back and forth.